Hello and welcome to Trib Talk. I'm Sean Means, reporter at the Salt Lake Tribune. As the coronavirus, the experts tell us, helps reduce the spread of the virus, our own governor, Gary Herbert, has urged Utah residents to wear masks when they're out in public, particularly when it's difficult to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. There's even been an effort to get a free face mask to every Utahn, made by Utah manufacturers. I got mine in the mail last Friday, about 6 weeks after the program was announced. It's handy, but I still prefer the one I sewed myself when all this started. But there are people who either ignore the urging of public health officials or outright argue against mask wearing as an infringement on their freedom. And of course, among the most notable people in the no mask category is the President of the United States. We're going to talk about masks and why people choose to wear them or not wear them. We welcome your questions, which you can submit using the chat function here. Joining me for today's discussion is Stephanie Mencimer. She's a staff reporter for Mother Jones, usually based in Washington, D.C., but she grew up in Utah and has recently been visiting family here and visited a familiar Salt Lake area shopping mall and wrote about the experience in Mother Jones. Stephanie, thank you for joining us today on Trib Talk. Thanks for having me. First off, let's talk about what you have been seeing in reaction to the coronavirus pandemic when in Washington, D.C. What was the typical routine being out and about in Washington?
It's so much different from here. D.C. was really locked down tight, to the point that you can't go in any stores except supermarkets and the pharmacy. People will actually cross the street to avoid passing you on the sidewalk there. I've been shouted at by numerous people if I didn't have a mask on. One day I was just walking with my son, 5 feet to my car that was parked outside, and one of my neighbors, 20 yards down the sidewalk, yelled at us, "Where are your masks?" So it's, DC is kind of a town of rule followers, bureaucrats and such. And so people there take it really seriously. And I think, we might even have gone a little overboard in DC with some of the restrictions, but it's very serious. My daughter she had a birthday last month, and I tried to get 4 of her friends to come over and just stand on the sidewalk and yell happy birthday with their masks on or whatever, bring a balloon or something. And they wouldn't do it. Their parents wouldn't let them. They wouldn't come. They wouldn't socially distance, and stand in the yard and just say happy birthday. They're all pretty much at home.
Okay. And has that been maintained as supposedly the lockdown has been easing off in some places?
Pretty much. I mean, I think a lot of people that I know are still very cautious about going out. They've started to reopen some of the restaurants just for outdoor seating. You still can't eat indoors. The stores are still not open. So the bookstore or the little shops in my neighborhood, you could get curbside pickup there, but you can't go inside.
Okay. Yeah, our bureau chief in DC, Tommy Burr, he's been telling us about what it's been like in DC, and that sounds about, you tell the same story. So, has it been working to have that kind of restriction and have it take off in such a way that even socially it's become a stigma not to wear masks?
I think so. I mean, if you measure it by the number of positive coronavirus cases in the city, that's definitely worked. They've gone way down. I guess the question is, what happens when you reopen, because, we can't live like that forever. But right now the hospitals haven't been overwhelmed. We haven't ended up like New York. So I think people feel like it's been successful.
Okay. So, let me ask you this. This is a question from one of our readers. Why do you think that the act of wearing a face mask has become a political issue?
Boy, it's really a sign of our times, isn't it? That something that should be a public health measure has taken on all these ramifications. I think there's some percentage of people in this country who really don't think the virus is a problem, and they think that it's just like the flu. So you wouldn't wear a mask for the flu season. Why would you do it now? And I think the president has definitely made that an issue. When he went to the factory in Maine where they were making the swabs for the coronavirus tests, and he refused to wear a mask. And then after he left, they had to throw out all the swabs in the factory because, you know, they were contaminated. So I think that he's definitely made this a thing. And I think that's probably what's setting the tone.
Okay. So now after weeks in DC dealing with all this, you and your daughter came to Utah, where you grew up and where your parents still live. Before you got back, what had you heard about how Utah was handling the pandemic?
Well, I knew that everything was open. I mean, that obviously was kind of a factor of why we came, because we were chafing a little under the restrictions in DC. I don't know, I guess maybe my Utah roots were showing. I've been out and about and doing things in DC that many of my friends and coworkers are not. I got a haircut actually like a week ago, which people were kind of shocked. But so I knew that the stores were open. I think actually Lagoon opened before we got here, because I subscribe to the Tribune, by the way, so I read the paper every morning, and so I knew.
We appreciate that.
I love the Tribune. Everyone should subscribe. And yeah, so I knew that a lot of stuff was open, and so, but I guess I still wasn't prepared for it when we got here.
Okay. Now, like I said in the introduction, I mean, the state's health department has been urging people to wear masks and even giving out the free masks. And I got to say, the message in general seems to be working. We had a poll that we ran this over the weekend of likely voters in the upcoming Republican primary, and overwhelmingly they said that wearing a mask was a sign of respect. 73% said this, all compared to only 10% who said it was a sign of weakness. But where it breaks down a bit is whether they do it themselves. Only 35% said that they wore a mask all the time in public. 20% said they wore it often in public. 24% said sometimes, and 21% said never. So with that in mind, that as a backdrop, let's talk about the Fashion Place Mall and your visit there. Tell us about what happened.
Well, so because all the stores had been closed in DC for so long, my daughter had outgrown all of her stuff. She had no summer clothes. You know, it was 40 degrees in DC in March when everything shut down. And then when we left, it was like 90, and she just had nothing to wear. And I don't know why, but we failed to be able to buy anything online. Like, stuff would take weeks and weeks to arrive, or like it would all be sold out. I don't know, something weird is going on with the economy. So we thought, well, we're going to Utah, we'll just go to the mall. And I thought this would be like going to Whole Foods in DC, where, you know, they have a guy with a clicker and he keeps track of how many people go in, and they make you wear a mask. You know, they won't even let you in the store without one. And so somehow I thought that's how the mall was going to be, which was naive. And so we just wanted to run in and grab some shorts and leave. You know, we didn't want to do anything too hazardous to our health. And when we got there, we walked in through the Dillard's entrance, and it was like the pandemic had never happened. There were people, no one was wearing a mask, not even the employees. There were like groups of people milling around, shopping. And it was, I think both of us kind of had a little panic attack. I don't know if that was in proportion to whatever risk we had, but because we've been locked down for 3 months, it was incredibly disorienting. Like, I haven't seen that many people in a public place in months. And so we kind of looked around, and then we're like, I think we better go back outside. So we went back out and tried to figure out another strategy to get to where we wanted to go.
Okay. So what happened after
that? So we walked around because we just wanted to go to H&M. You know, they have cheap clothes for teenagers. And so they have an outdoor entrance to H&M at Fashion Place. And so we walked around outside, and on the way there, we passed the Cheesecake Factory. And there was this huge line of people waiting to get an indoor table, and they weren't socially distanced. None of them were wearing masks. And I was like, wow, people are going to like risk their lives for the Cheesecake Factory. I mean, maybe I'm overreacting, but we were sort of shocked, because you can't even go in a restaurant in DC unless it's just for quick takeout pickup. And then we kept going, and we went to try to get into H&M, and they had closed all of the outside entrances to the store. So we had to go in through the main mall entrance, and we walked in and got all the hand sanitizer at the station when you go inside. But then it was just like any other time, except that like some of the stores were still closed. Like the Build-A-Bear was closed at the time, and some jewelry stores. But then there were Victoria's Secret, there were like 40 people outside waiting to get in there, because I guess inside the store they were trying to socially distance. But what happened is that they made this huge line outside into the corridors of the mall, and people weren't wearing masks, and they were just all kind of clumped up right there. And I think it was kind of counterproductive. If they were trying to keep people, socially distanced while they shopped, they created a new hazard out in the hallway because there were just so many people waiting to get in. And it was similar at H&M when we got down there. So we didn't end up in there either. So we decided this was not going to work out very well, because we didn't want to stand in line. People who didn't seem to, well, and it was weird because we went to this sunglass hut. I don't know why. We needed a pair of sunglasses, and there were only like 2 people standing in line there. So we thought, well, we'll see if we can go in. And we got in line, and people got right up behind us. Like, no one had come that close to me in 3 months. Like, you walk down the sidewalk in DC and people would literally cross the street to avoid you, passing you. But here they're just like, yeah, this is great. We're shopping like it's any other time. So, yeah, it was really disorienting.
Okay. Do you have a sense, and this is something our one of our readers, Summer, is asking, do you have a sense of why you think Utahns in particular are ignoring the mask guidelines and social distancing rules?
I mean, I have to think that people are doing it because I know there's been an uptick in cases here, but like compared to some place like New York, there just aren't that many coronavirus cases here yet, or, maybe ever. And I think people measure risk, by what's close to them. And I imagine if you talk to people, they would say, I don't know anybody who's gotten it, or I don't know anybody who's died from it. And I think that is probably the main reason. And then I don't know, it's probably, I got the sense the public health messaging has failed on a lot of levels, because when I do see people here wearing masks, they tend to be elderly. And I think that, there's a problem there, because the elderly people, I suspect, are wearing masks because they think it protects them, when it doesn't really do much if you're the wearer. We rely on everybody else to wear the masks to protect the elderly. And so that, I think people haven't gotten that message.
Right. I mean, I've seen the stats where supposedly, if you're wearing a mask, that drops the chances of you catching it by 10%. But if everybody else around you is wearing the masks, that drops the spread by 70%, or some number like that. I'd have to look it up again. You wrote about this for Mother Jones. What? First off, let's talk about the response you got outside of Utah.
It's been an interesting mix of things. There were a fair number of people who are yelling at me saying, well, you're stupid. You went there. Like, what were you thinking anyway? Plus, maybe you're part of the problem. Shouldn't you be locked down at home like all the rest of us? And yeah, to be fair, that's probably, there may be some truth to that. But we've been super careful. We wore respirator masks and in the mall too. And but that was kind of interesting. There was a lot of like hate tweets about that. Other people were just shocked because they're so locked down. They didn't realize that there's this parallel universe going on in the United States, where I think people in more densely populated areas have been locked down, and they don't realize that, elsewhere life is kind of continuing as normal.
Is it urban versus rural? I mean, comparatively, or east versus west, or red state, blue state? I mean, can you tell where the breakdown, where the split is happening?
I could not really tell, because Virginia is very close to DC. We border DC, and Virginia has a pretty active reopen movement, and there have been a lot of protests there by people who are angry. They also don't want to wear masks in Virginia. So it's not just a rural, it might just be red versus blue. I'm not really sure. I mean, because there are some places that have been really hard hit with the coronavirus that aren't, they're not urban. Like Logan, Cache County right now has got a bunch of cases, and it's not necessarily confined just to urban areas. Right.
You were up there in Logan, Cache County area. Were you up there looking at the outbreak up at the meatpacking areas, or?
I was not. I took my daughter up Logan Canyon, and looked
Okay.
at trout streams. But it was funny though. We went to the Maverick just in Hiram, which is right near the meatpacking plant there, and we wore our masks inside to go get some snacks. Everyone stared at us like we were aliens who had landed there. So it was definitely a different kind of experience.
Okay. I guess trying to think what else I'm asking here. The what kind of, I mean, what have you seen from, I mean, your family lives here, lives in Park, you're in Park City. What did they warn, what did they tell you, or what did they warn you about when, before you got here?
So my family, they're all mask wearers. Okay. And probably because my parents are older, they're, you know, concerned for themselves. My sister and her family also live here, and they, my sister, she was kind of like, why are you coming here? Because people are crazy. And I, you know, every time I say I went to Smith's, and it was like the virus never happened. And she's like, oh yeah, it's been like that the whole time. So she had kind of warned me, but they're all very much complying with the rules. So I don't know exactly what what separates them from other people in the state, but I know for like all my cousins and my aunts, they're all wearing masks. So they feel like maybe Utah's gone a little overboard with opening up.
Well, let me ask about that. The idea of opening up, and then the idea of possibly having to close up again if a second wave of corona cases really starts hitting hard. Do you see governments or businesses being able to do that, or wanting to do that, to basically close up? You know, they close and they're starting to reopen, and then they're going to shut down again.
Well, I think if they have a big outbreak somewhere, definitely they're going to have to shut down, at least for a while. It's a really tough thing because, you know, they can't shut down the economy forever. It could be years before we have a vaccine. And we don't even know if it will work very well. And so I think that, you know, the country's going to have to figure out how to live with this thing. And I think living with it involves wearing masks, but, you know, I think that we haven't quite gotten there. But I know when I talked to the mayor's, Jeni Wilson's office and the Salt Lake County Health Department, they said so far, you know, they've opened up and they still have higher numbers of positive cases in Salt Lake County, but it hasn't really spiked in a way you might expect, at least not yet, despite like the protests and all of the people at the mall. So it's really, I mean, I think we're in just such an amazing period of uncertainty right now that it's hard to know. But I do think in places like, I don't think if you're like if you have a call center or some kind of a factory or a meatpacking plant, I think it's possible that those places are going to open and shut down and open and shut down because people are in close quarters, and that's where you really do see big outbreaks. So we could be playing like whack-a-mole with this virus for, you know, a couple of more years.
Mm-hmm. Now, how's your daughter as a mask wearer? Is she religious about it, or how does she handle it?
Oh yeah, she's a mask wearer. A lot of her friends have been really terrified by the whole pandemic. It's really, I found it distressing actually how much these kids were scared. And a lot of her friends in DC, you know, really haven't left home in like 3 months. They're not going out to do a lot. And I think they've read all the news, and so they're all very compliant. And she was very compliant here. So she totally understands why this is important. And I think we've been here now for 10 days. And I think we're finally starting to relax a little bit. Which maybe we're swinging a little more, or like we realize we can still go out and we're not going to die from the mall trip. So I think that's actually been good for our brains on some level.
Right. Have you seen? I guess the question is we've noticed locally that teens and people, you know, younger people, it's sort of split 50-50 almost. There's some who are very concerned and wear masks all the time. But then you've got a lot who are like, hey, I'm young, I'm going to live forever. And so they just go out as they would normally. Have you seen that split in Utah?
I haven't been around that many teenagers here actually. So
Okay.
but there were certainly a bunch of them in the mall, I think. And I imagine, and then I guess they must be going to Lagoon. I read that Lagoon just had to impose a mandatory mask rule there. So I imagine kids were going there as they have been since I was a kid and went there, and
Right. We had heard stories that the rule had been you had to wear a mask to get into the gate at Lagoon, and they weren't really checking after that. And so what we'd heard stories of people who would wear the mask, check in, and then as soon as they were through the gate, mask was gone. So they have instituted rules now that saying that, and this started yesterday actually, that if you wear a mask, if you're in Lagoon, you got to be wearing a mask while you're in line for the rides as well. So they're getting more strict about that. So what I mean, I'll ask the question that nobody can answer. What's next? Where are we going with all this?
Well, like I said, I don't think I don't think the vaccine is going to save us anytime soon. So I think we're going to try to figure out how to live with this thing. And that is I read that it's comparable a little bit to the HIV epidemic, the AIDS epidemic. Not, it's a different way of infection, obviously, but we'll never get to zero risk. And we can't stay locked up for another 2 years. And, the economy is in bad shape. People are suffering, and I don't think we can overlook that. So we have to find ways to just live in in an environment where this is always going to be a possibility. And I think it's going to be a little hit and miss as places start to open up and we see what happens. I hope that there is a bigger emphasis on protecting people in long-term care facilities, because honestly, if I had a relative in a nursing home right now, I would be freaking out. I would want to get them out of there. And I think that, so many people who have died from the virus live in places like that. And so, we should be focusing on the places where it's a huge problem. And then for everyone else, I think we probably just have to wear our masks and wash our hands a lot and try not to, be in crowded places if we can do that, and see what happens. I mean, lots changed already in 3 months, what we know about the virus and how, we understand more about its transmission.
Right. That's true. What, so, okay, just when what you said you wear an N95, where, I mean, how often do you have to change it? What's the regimen for you?
Well, we only wore we have KN95 masks, like the Chinese knockoffs, but we wore those on the airplane and in the mall and any place where we feel like there's going to be a lot of people indoors. But otherwise we just wear kind of like surgical masks. And not so much outside. I mean, the outside transmission is not a huge, there's very little evidence that there's a lot of outside transmission, as long as you're not in a crowd. I think it would be different if you were in a political rally or a concert, especially where people are yelling a lot. I wouldn't want to be even with a mask. I don't think I would want to be in a situation like that. But, we try to just be cognizant of those things. Because I think, when you read about the virus, the issues are proximity and the length of time that you might be exposed. And so we keep those things in mind when we decide where to wear our masks and for how long we stay places.
Right. We sent our intern Conor Sanders to Cedar City on Saturday night for the rally / country music concert, and he was one of the few people on premises who was wearing a mask, and he was teased for it.
Oh wow!
He got and he can always say, my boss made me. But yeah, there was some fair amount of razzing from the people who were there. So we've seen it. I mean, there was the famous video when the president went to Arizona, and the reporters outside were getting mocked and razzed by the people picketing outside, the pro-Trump protesters outside. Being called sheeple and all that sort of thing. So, So I'm guessing you're not going to Tulsa on Saturday night.
No, I am not. I'm not even sure I will go to Lagoon. There's apparently, I think what's sort of interesting about the whole pandemic is just the psychological effects, because I have had some panic attacks since I've been out here. Like, oh my God, I hope I haven't killed somebody, or, I hope we're going to be okay. And we're fine. And so I think that, people who are conscientious and concerned about the virus, and I don't think any of us want to be murderers, right? Like, so you don't want to be an asymptomatic person and giving this disease to old people, or, your parents, or, things like that. So I think that it does weird things to your brain to be in this kind of like constant state of anxiety. And, so I don't know, it's been a strange sort of couple months.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, something I found is when I go into a grocery store, and I mean, even in a place where where a lot of people are wearing masks, I'll go in and I'll have my mask on, and everybody kind of gives you a berth. They give you your space if they see, and in places where it's like 50-50, even the people who aren't wearing masks will sort of, steer around you if you are wearing a mask. And I find that kind of an interesting, as you say, psychological aspect of this as this has been going. Well, how long are you going to be staying in Utah? Do you know when you're going to be heading back to DC?
Yeah, we're here for another 2 weeks at the end of the month.
Okay. What do you have any expectations of what it's going to be like when you get back?
I think it might actually be hard for us because we've been outside a lot, and it's it's nice. I think partly being in the city and also with the pandemic, it felt a little claustrophobic in DC. So it's been nice to just kind of hit the road out here. And I think when we go back, we will have to contend with that again. I mean, the public pools aren't even open in DC at all, not for lap swimming, nothing. And so there's not a whole lot going on there aside from protesting. Like there's lots of protests going on. But like for a couple of months, they took all the nets off the public tennis courts even, and there's no summer camp. So I'm not sure. I'm not actually looking forward to going back all that much in spite of my terrifying trip to the mall here. The good thing about Utah is it's so beautiful and you can be outside and you can safely enjoy some recreational activities.
How much do you think the pandemic and the sort of claustrophobia that you described, how much do you think that's played into the ferocity of the protest movement?
I was actually down in front of the White House 2 weeks ago for the first big protest, the first night where things really got crazy in DC. And it did feel a little bit like people had been pent up and like there was some rage. I mean, there were rage about a lot of things, obviously, but I did wonder if having been inside and stuck for 3 months and also, with the unemployment rate skyrocketing too, that it all just kind of came together that night. I watched people set fires, in Lafayette Park, and there was a lot of anger. And I did wonder that if this had been a different time, if this might have been a different kind of protest. I think people would have protested, but I don't know if it would have gotten out of hand. That was a night we had a lot of looting in DC, and like even the bike store next door to my house got robbed. It was crazy. But then it changed, and now it's been almost all peaceful, and the violence is coming from the cops and the administration's response to the protesters more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think we've seen that here too. I mean, the first big protests on the Saturday 2 weeks ago, and then practically every day, there's been more, at least one march or something happening. And yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of pent up everything going on, and certainly being trapped in the house for weeks is exacerbated that, if nothing else. So, all right. Well, Stephanie Mencimer of Mother Jones, thank you so much for joining us on Trib Talk today. Appreciate the conversation. Everybody, thank you for joining, sitting in with us, and we look forward to having you on the next Trib Talk. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.